The Extension, Education, and Economics Development Committee. Number 2, Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Thank you see, we got a lot of people in the viewing audience. It's always nice to see people interested in the committee meetings. We do have one for public comment. Kay Palmer.
Yeah. Step right up there. You're good to go. Okay.
Yeah, I'm Kay Palmer. I live at 603 Great Place in Wausau, Wisconsin. My municipality is the city of Wausau. I'd like to take a few moments to make some observations of last month's meeting of this committee. My intent is that through my observation, I may provide some points of clarity as I understand them in my time being engaged in childcare. I want to share a little bit of my story to put my observation in context. I was voted onto the Wausau Child Care Board of Directors in December of 2021, not because I had any expertise in childcare. I don't even have children of my own, but because I had experience in organizational management. There was some thought that I could bring some effectiveness to the board. The majority of my career has been working in commercial nuclear power generation and electrical energy distribution. I know more about boiling water reactors and electrical distribution switchgear than childcare, but I've learned a lot about childcare. In February of 2022, the very next Wausau Child Care Board meeting, I was voted in as the president of the board. In September of 2022, the then executive director resigned. The rest of the board members all took 2 steps back, leaving me standing in the front, and I was voted in as the interim executive director. And the learning began in earnest. One of the things I learned early on is that there's a big difference between childcare and babysitting. At my first Dream Up meeting, there was a conversation regarding funding a marketing campaign targeted at Wisconsin voters to inform them of the difference. I have found that childcare is a strategically planned day of activity that is targeted to a child's personal growth and stage of development, and even the style of play is considered. Babysitting, on the other hand, is a person who is overseeing a group of children, typically of varying ages in the same setting, with some activities in play. Last month, there was a little bit of conversation about the 2 approaches, and my observation was that folks were combining the 2 approaches, creating some confusion in the conversation. I'm not making a judgment. It's just stating there are multiple approaches. Last month, there was also a comment regarding parents' right to choose the form of childcare that works for them. In my time, though short it may be, I have never being a big word, heard anything that would indicate a mandate as to what parents should or should not do in their choice of the type of care for their children. Whether it be a stay-at-home parent with their children, they choose a nanny collective, a larger group, in-home care, a child care facility, or any other approach that they may find. To me, there's anything but a mandate, but a true interest in providing parents with choices that are best suited to their own needs. In my opinion and observation, this is the whole purpose of this meeting, as well as the Dream Up group and the others who are working to ensure safe care for children. These folks are looking for ways to improve on the number of choices available to parents and the best means to support increasing the number of those choices. This is not a mandate for a specific child care option, that parents are required to follow. One of my biggest learnings in this time is that I have grown to have the utmost respect for the folks who are engaged in teaching our littles. Having observed them for these many months, I have found passion and genuine interest in partnering with the parents to provide learning opportunities for each of the kiddos. Their work is amazing, and my hat is off to them and the work that they do. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to number 4, approval of the June 1st, 2023 EEED committee meeting. Motion by Supervisor Rosenberg, second by Supervisor Unger. All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. If it's up to decide with the committee, I am going to skip number 5 and save that till the end, so people don't have to stick around and listen to this. So if they can stay if they want, but I'm going to move on to number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. 6A. Excuse me. How does the committee intend to complete its work called under the revision of the strategic plan relative to access to affordable, high-quality child care and safe and affordable housing? 6A1, presentation from Aaron Ruff and the Marathon County Dream Up Corps team.
Get into a slideshow.
There you go. All right, thank you, Mr. Chair, and members of the committee, and I'll be very brief before passing it off to our health department to have Laura and Aaron and others talk about the work of the Dream Up group. But just to give a little bit of context again, I mean, this effort certainly relates to the strategic plan that was amended, the county board strategic plan that was recently amended, and this committee was tasked with coming up with what I'll say are strategies or further laying out a roadmap for 2 really big challenges facing not only Marathon County, but every county in the state of Wisconsin, and quite honestly, every county in the country. And those are, as you mentioned, Mr. Chair, childcare and housing. As it relates to childcare, again, credit to the county board and this committee. More than a year ago, the previous term of the county board directed administration to start to look at what are some things that it could do relative to childcare externally and internally. Internally, that conversation is really happening at the HR Finance and Property Committee, but externally, this committee directed administration to apply for, as you'll hear about, the Dream Up grant, again, more than a year ago. And I can tell you as an employer, I do have, as an individual, I have 2 children, but thankfully they are out of the child care, the age where that's needed. They're 9 and 12. And I think back to my challenges, and as is the nature of many things, they're fundamentally different even from when my kids were in need of care. And, you know, it became acutely evident to me when we have 2 very high performing employees here in Marathon County that have, they're married and they have children. And I had some really challenging conversations with them about the challenges they have had around trying to have childcare, doing as many innovative things, seeking out a nanny from overseas. You know, that they were willing to do a lot of things to provide safe care for their child. So that really led to the conversations at this committee. And again, a credit to the committee to direct us to move forward with the Dream Up grant application. And we, as you'll hear from the presentation from Aaron, I think one of the things that is evident to me through this long process is, again, the kind of broad spectrum of this challenge. It's not just a challenge for government. It's a challenge for every business, many businesses in our community, individuals. And one of the positives of our Dream Up grant application is we had a lot of those representatives from those cohorts at the table. So we had representatives from child caring, the people that are doing this work every day in terms of trying to refer people to providers that can meet the need. We had providers. Steph Daniels is here from the Y. You already heard from Kay from Wausau Child Care, people that can give us some insight. We had people working on expanding the number of providers. Elsa's here again to talk about the work that she did. We had business representatives from the Wausau Chamber of Commerce, the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership, school districts, higher education, and of course, county and city government were involved. So a really broad cohort of people. And the challenge transcends all of those various segments. I've had conversations with Keith Hiltz from the school district about the impacts, what it means for them. And across all of that work, what became really evident to me, and I think you'll hear it in the presentation and certainly from Dave Ekman in a video that he put forward for you to view today. I don't know that anyone's saying, hey, we have the answer, but the request that Mr. Ekman on behalf of the Wausau Chamber has, the Greater Wausau Chamber, and I think, as your administrator, the thing I can say is I do think there's value of county government as well as every other cohort that I referenced before being part of the continued conversation. There's been a lot of good conversations that have happened. There's a lot of innovative approaches that are being taken in other contexts, but that kind of, again, lays the groundwork for what you're going to hear from the Dream Up group today. The whole purpose of that, again, is to help you as you tackle the big challenge you have in front of you relative to the strategic plan amendment. That is, this committee has to come up with that kind of the framework or roadmap for what those potential solutions might be. So with that, Mr. Chair, I think I'm going to kick it over to Laura, and she will proceed further with the presentation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So hello, my name is Laura Scuderi. I am the health officer for Marathon County. Aaron was unable to make it today, so I'm stepping in. And I wanted to walk you through the process that we took with the Dream Up group that Lance was just speaking about, and tell you how we came to our result and indicators. So the result you see here, the result is what we effectively want to see as a result of our effort. And so in order to get to this point, to understanding what it is we wanted to see, we used a process called results-based accountability. It's basically a disciplined, facilitated process to determine action that will move social change on complex problems. It uses data-driven decision-making, a data-driven decision-making process to determine change and how we can collectively get there. So we use that process quite a bit in public health because we deal with a lot of very complex social problems. The group also then went on and decided what is it that we need to see to know that we are making a difference. What is the measurement? What is going to indicate whether or not we are making a difference in our planning? And so these two indicators were chosen by the group through this facilitated process. And they answer the question, how do we know if our efforts are making an impact? So we decided the number one indicator is number of regulated child care providers in Marathon County and the total number of child care slots of regulated child care providers in Marathon County. So what does that look like? This is the data visualization of that. So you can see this is regulated child care providers in Marathon County, and you can see that they're decreasing every year since 2010. The bottom line here, so it's 83 in 2022, and it's going to keep going down unless we make any changes. Now, the intent is if we are actually able to turn the curve, so the process is called the turn the curve process, if we're able to make a difference, we're going to see that curve turn up. So that the line on top of there, the line that says 90, 100, 110, that is if we make a positive impact. So this is the other indicator. This is the total capacity of child care providers in Marathon County. And again, you can see that it's decreasing ever since 2010. There was a little uptick in 2022. There's another uptick in 2020. But overall, we're seeing a very dramatic increase overall. So again, the bottom line is if we do nothing. what's going to happen to child care providers in our county. The top line, the brown line, is if we actually do something and we try to make a difference. So Dream Up decided on some SMART goals. And just to remind everybody, SMART goals mean specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. So these goals are the SMART goals for the grant. We decided that by November 1st, 2023, we would invest in and retain the current child care providers in Marathon County. And by the same date, we'd establish alternative child care business models in Marathon County, partnering local employers with child care providers. So this is what our budget looked like, and you can see that the majority of the budget, the funds were spent to aid local child care providers in staff retention, program supplies, or minor renovations. This is just a drop in the bucket to what the county needs, though. There's a lot more investment that the county can use in this area. So Marathon County's current role, we are the fiscal agent for the Dream Up grant. And then also Aaron Ruff, who was not able to make it here today, he's the public health educator that has been facilitating the Dream Up process with the core Dream Up team. So he's been taking them through that results-based accountability process and doing coordination meeting facilitation. And then he also does any of the grant administration and the monthly reporting. So that is our role, is that we provide that backbone support. I just want to call your attention real quick to the 2023 Life Report that was just released in June. And in this Life Report, and just for those of you who don't know and don't live it every day like I do, is that the Life Report is actually considered our community health assessment. So the community does an assessment on what are the current health needs. They send out surveys and they look at all different individuals within Marathon County to determine what are the health needs of our community currently. So in the most recent Life Report, a call to action was childcare, and you can see it up here. If you go to the Marathon County Pulse website, if you just type into any Google search bar Marathon County Pulse, that pulls up a lot of information, local data that we at the health department compile, and we do surveillance on childcare information within, and also a wonderful array of health information at your fingertips regarding Marathon County specifically. So it is a call to action. Childcare is a need within our community. And then I'm going to do this quick little, let's see if it queues up or if we're going to watch an ad real quick.
Alicia and Craig needed an early care and education program for their 2-year-old son, Jaden. Eventually, they found a suitable child care center nearby that offers a nurturing environment for Jaden and is open while they're at work. But it costs nearly $10,000 per year. That's more than a mortgage in most states. Even though they're paying the average price for child care, it's a financial burden, and now they're expecting a second child. Meanwhile, Jaden's teacher, Sonia, is worrying about how to put food on her own table. Even though she has a bachelor's degree, she earns less than $15 an hour. In fact, more than half of childcare workers and nearly half of preschool and kindergarten teachers reside in families that utilize public assistance. Childcare is complex work that can impact children throughout their lives. Yet Sonia, like many early educators, doesn't receive benefits like health insurance and paid leave. So why do early childhood teachers earn so little when parents pay so much for childcare? There's a flaw in the system. Parent fees alone are not enough to fund quality early education. Let's look at the facts. Parents pay an average of $10,000 annually for center-based care. In certain locations, and depending on the age of the child, the average cost for licensed childcare is even higher. Let's take a closer look at Jaden's Child Care Center. He's one of 40 children attending full-time. Family payments equal $400,000 a year. About 12% goes to rent, utilities, and maintenance. 23% goes for classroom materials, food, and administrative costs. This leaves about $260,000 for personnel. Early care and education is labor intensive and requires low adult to child ratios to ensure quality interactions. Jayden Center, open 10 hours a day with 40 children and 3 classrooms, needs at least 3 lead teachers, 6 assistant teachers, and 1 director. The remaining money doesn't allow for median salaries, let alone benefits. Parents can't afford to pay. Teachers can't afford to stay. Public investment is the way. We invest in education for older children. Why not for all children? Here's how we can advocate for more public investment in early education programs. Invest in early care and education as other industrialized nations do. If parents are charged, ensure no family pays more than 7% of their income on childcare. Ensure that all teachers have better compensation and workplace support. Those caring for our youngest should at least be paid on par with kindergarten teachers. Question your legislators and candidates about their response to these issues. So let's invest in our teachers and children. Together, we can make it right for children, their families, and their teachers.
Okay, so I just want to mention that the data in Marathon County shows that 50% of zip codes in Marathon County are actually considered child care deserts. And so I'm going to hand this over now to my colleague Kelly Borchardt, she's from Child Caring. She's been a part of the Dream Out process, and she'll give us a little bit more context on the child care landscape.
Thanks, Laura. Let me see if I can manipulate this back to our. Great. So I appreciate that video. That video was created by the National Child Care Resource and Referral Agency, in which Child Caring is a member of that national association. And this is not a new slide to you. You've seen this before. We presented this before. It reinforces this idea that the cost of child care is one of the highest within a family's budget, often more than the cost of housing, college tuition, transportation, or food. And that it's, families all across the country, as Lance mentioned, it's difficult for people to find quality childcare that's affordable. These figures represent Marathon County specifically, so we're talking about childcare costing anywhere from $125 to $350 a week, which is 3 times the affordable amount that is set by the federal government, saying that no family should pay more than 7% of their income for the cost of care. And we see a difference here in. Okay, thanks. The difference that we see, like as represented here by age group, between the under age 2 is that it typically costs less to send your child to a family child care provider, and so that difference there represents that, and more to send your child to a group child care provider, and then typically costs less the older the child becomes. For some reason, I do not know why there's dollar signs on those graphs as opposed to numbers. Very interesting, but you get the gist of it, right? Like, it costs more for children under the age of 2 than it does for older children, and it's just really interesting when you look at paying for 2 children here in Marathon County could cost you more than $23,000 a year. Another important fact here is the accessibility or the availability of childcare in Marathon County. We've talked about this before. We've seen a 58% decrease in the number of regulated childcare providers over the past decade or so. Laura mentioned the 50% of zip codes here in Marathon County are considered deserts with very little or no access to care. So in addition to this, I would add that since 2010, we've lost over 1,000 regulated childcare slots. So there's a 25% decrease in the number of slots, and those slots are no longer available as a result of program closures here in Marathon County. Interestingly, we're sitting at about 82 programs today, because there was the center that closed in Stratford as well since the last time we pulled these numbers. Just to give you a sense for when we say regulated childcare, and who does that include and what does that mean here in Marathon County? So we're talking about a total of 25 licensed group child care centers like Wassa Child Care and the YMCA. Those are considered group care centers. You can see that's the largest capacity are those group centers. We also have 2 licensed camps, a couple of preschools, some school-age care-only programs, one that's exempt from licensing, some Head Starts, and we have 42 licensed or certified family child care providers to represent just over 3,400 slots here in Marathon County. So you can imagine we need hundreds of child care staff to keep these 83 or 82 programs in operation. Some of the issues that we're facing, these are not new. These are things that we've been dealing with for the past long as my 30 years in this field. But what has happened is the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated these issues for us. And so we're seeing, and you'll hear from the providers here as well, but we're seeing lack of applicants for, positions that are available because there's low benefits, wages. And, I appreciated what Kay said about the difference between a babysitter and a child care provider. There's just a lack of respect and value for people in that field. There's a lot of burnout of staff, and people turn over very quickly, so there aren't people in positions for very long. We're also losing our child care counts funding, which we'll talk about again. That was temporary relief from federal dollars. And so as a result, families can't find care. When we have listed here wait lists as long as 30 infants, those are significantly higher than that now. The wait lists are closer to 2 years. There are still classroom closures among child care programs, and our family child care providers turn over quite significantly. Here's a quote from a Marathon County parent. "We moved here in June and continued to drive our daughter to Stevens Point until mid-August when we found care on a coincidence. We're grateful for how it worked out for us, but it's scary about the lack of care available. It puts parents in a tough situation. Everyone deserves to have a safe place for their kids when they're working." Wanted to cover, there's been some talk about regulation among members of our committee and folks in the community, and wanted to talk just for a couple of minutes about why this is important. Child care regulations are intended to protect children from the risk of harm while in out-of-home care. Every state assumes the responsibility for regulating care because the federal government does not set national child care standards. Because of this, regulations can vary among states regarding requirements for things such as the group size, ratios of children per staff member, the teacher training, nutrition, health, safety, and space requirements. Child care regulations teach providers about the important aspects of child care, but they also inform parents about what they can expect from child care. Regulations, again, don't assume quality. Instead, they set minimal levels of quality protection that must be present when children are in care. Regulations set standards for adequate, but they can't guarantee the quality. And in fact, in Wisconsin, we do have a program called Young Star, which is the quality rating system that the child care providers participate in. Again, this slide shares when regulation is required, and just a brief overview here. And not so much. So basically, anyone providing care supervision for 4 or more children under the age of 7 for less than 24 hours a day must be licensed by the state of Wisconsin. So they're really intended, the little parts and the exceptions are intended to let you know that there are exceptions to when regulation is not required, like if you're going to Sunday school, karate, or dance class, or when there's a grandparent watching their grandchildren, things like that. But we want you to just understand that when regulation is required is when there are 4 or more children under the age of 7 in care, right? So that's regulated by the Department of Children and Families here in Wisconsin. There are benefits that we talk about as we recruit child care providers about why regulation might be a good opportunity for them. And these are just a list of some of the things. There are different options for support when they are certified or licensed. Again, I mentioned the Child Care Counts program, which was a federal program. It's been offered to the child care providers over the past 3 years. They were considered stabilization payments, and they were funded by our federal either CARES funding, CRSA funding, ARPA funding. Those are all things that we've heard over the last several years. And those that support was a way for childcare providers to receive monthly payments so that there was consistent funding coming to them throughout the pandemic, right? There was a question asked, I think, of one of our members, how much Child Care Counts funding actually came here to Marathon County? This slide provides you an overview of the idea that there was over $10 million distributed to child care programs here in Marathon County. And this is a breakdown of those funds, like per zip code here. It's set to end January of 2024. Because the Joint Finance Committee voted to end child care counts, and now that the budget is passed, it will be ending as of January 2024. And I believe this is at the point where we wanted to invite some of our child care providers or directors to come forth and talk about specific examples or instances that they've been working with, and I would invite folks to do that. Steph, are you coming up? Thank you. Steph Daniels here is from the YMCA.
One thing she mentioned was that Counts program is ending in January of 24. It actually was cut in half as of May. So all the funding that we were receiving did get cut in half, which for our wise, we decided to do the $1 more incentive and $1.25 as of January. So we pay all of our teachers $1.25 more than they get paid so that we can, one, track it for grant purposes, and then a way to continue it even after grant funding ended. It's a way that we do try to recruit staff because we do pay a little bit higher than some centers. We do offer full benefits package, but even the benefits package we do offer for health insurance and dental, with the wage they get, sometimes eats up the cost of even what their insurance cost. So I'd say for as far as counts goes and the funding that the government did, we did receive, that's been extremely helpful and kind of gave us that boost. I just do think the cliff is coming way sooner than I think we really were anticipating. I would say the hardest thing is we lose staff to Quick Trip, Target. We're not losing people to other centers. We're not losing people to stay in the industry. We're losing people to other businesses that pay more. It's less stressful. You're not caring for children. Being in a room with a 12 2-year-olds is a lot of work. It's not for the faint of hearts. So I think it's keeping people in the early childhood industry is probably the biggest challenge. And I think before we add more slots and before we do anything that we want to do, we have to keep the staff we have, whether it's assistant teachers, lead teachers, and directors. So anything else for me?
Any questions from the committee? I have one. You say you do the $1.25 more. Where is that coming from?
Well, about 75% of it is paid for through the counts funding. It was until it was cut in half. The rest comes from tuition. I mean, the Y is a large organization, so we have membership dues that subsidize. But we are an organization within an organization, right? So we have outside partner. Our Y can sustain that. Standalone centers, it's probably a lot harder. So it just doesn't probably work as well. But Counts really funded the whole thing up until really May 1st.
Thank you. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Kurt, you had one? Whether
So when the subsidy or the federal funding is going to end in January, what do you see that impact, or how do you see that impacting your ability to provide slots for childcare?
For the Y, we will increase parent cost. Tuition will go up. That is kind of a given as of September. And then, really after that, it's hopefully partnerships with other, private partnerships with industries. We're going to keep pushing for some kind of probably state or local help. So I think, but for the short term, it's probably going to fall on parents because there isn't really another solution as of right now. And it came, I think, quicker than, like I said, we thought. If we had full funding through January of 24, maybe, but because it was already cut in half, it just really took, and we learned that, I think, maybe in March. So March of this year, we learned that, well, you're going to get funding, but it's going to get cut in half. So even if you had a plan to make it through January of 24, it was like, well, what's plan B? And we're going to continue the $1.25. But we were hoping to increase another 25 cents, but I think that will also have to hold off until we can kind of figure out, what a budget looks like. And I think the counts program really helped a lot of centers, but it also made January of 24 kind of scary because you're probably making it along. So that end is just like, okay, what's the solution? And we don't want to put it on parents, but we can't give everyone a pay cut either. Otherwise, we won't have care for parents.
I have another piece to add to that. So for Wausau Child Care, we have space we have more slots that we could make available, but we don't have the staff. And so without the funding, again, we're not as competitive as Quick Trip, McDonald's, and some of the other places. So we can't even utilize the space that we have available to bring children in. So therefore, we have slots, but no staff.
And if I could speak on behalf of some of the other childcare programs that we've heard from, there will be rate increases. They're already starting, and we're hearing anywhere from like a 25 to 30% increase in the rates and what parents will be paying, if providers can make the choice to stay open and sustain what they have. That's what we suspect will happen. Yeah, please.
Hi, my name is Jennifer Westcott. I'm an early childhood advocate. I was formerly an assistant director at a large child care here in town, and for the past year I've been subbing at different centers trying to help out because I see what's going on everywhere. I have a lot of solutions, and a lot of it comes down to money, and how we can get these things funded. But I liked in the video where it said our early child care teachers should be paid the same as a kindergarten teacher. Everything that they are doing is that equal of elementary school teachers, and they should be treated in the same form that way. We know that 90% of brain development comes before age 5. How can we expect to pay them less than every other educator that is out there? There's so much more to it. We have a lot of great teacher assistants. We have a lot of great people coming from college and doing things that can help out a lot. But we do need teachers that know what's going on, teachers that are able to know what child development is, know how to help them through that. And unfortunately, when we have such a large pool of younger workforce that haven't had that capability to learn those things, it's hurtful to our children and hurtful to our families. They need to be able to have someone that they can trust and they can come to ask questions. A lot of our new parents and things like that rely on their child care providers to go back and forth and be able to give them information that's up to date and accurate when it comes to raising a child. So I did want to touch also on the regulations and the amount of children that they care for. I liked her when I was a teacher for 3-year-olds. 3-year-olds are 1 to 10 in the state of Wisconsin. They can be in a class size of 20. So I had in my class 23-year-olds that I took care of with another assistant. You can imagine what that's like. My child who was in 3rd grade at Franklin Elementary at the time had 16 kids in his class. So here we have kids that are 5, 6, 7 years older in smaller class sizes with more help than the ones that are very much smaller there. So I wish I had the answers. I wish I could pull the money out of wherever I could, but I do think that we have to get together and we have to lift up our child care providers because they're incredibly important, and we need to find a way to fund that because we can't put it on the parents. Our parents are struggling. They are stressed out. I know that you can go to any restaurant any day of the week and moms and dads are trying to buy a meal for their family because they're running here, running there, running everywhere on top of, working as much as they can to pay for everything on top of that. So we want to be sure that our parents don't have to pay as much, but also that they have high quality teachers and high quality assistants to be able to help them. So I'm taking this year or two until we can kind of figure out what to do. I love childcare, I love children, I love those under 5 kids, but I have to be able to give good care to them, and I want to make sure that the families and the children are getting the best for it. And unfortunately, we're not able to do that until we get some outside funding for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any, go ahead, Lance.
I think we have one more slide from, I said before, Dave Ekman from the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce. He can't be here, but he's been part of the Dream Up group, and he wanted to send along a video, so I'm going to try to play a video too. I'm not sure I'm going to be as effective as Laura, but we'll see.
Good afternoon, members of the Education Economic Development Committee of Marathon County Government. First, I want to just extend a happy 4th of July to you. I hope you had a great holiday with your family and friends. This morning or this afternoon, I'm reaching out to you to present a perspective from the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce with respect to some of the economic development challenges we face here in the Greater Wausau Marathon County region. So as you all know, we are in the midst of a prolonged workforce crisis. And our business and industries are feeling it, where they're not able to get the workforce required to even sustain and grow in their companies to meet the missions of which they serve. We know we have a housing challenge as an impediment for workforce. We know we have a child care challenge with an impediment for people to engage in the workforce. These are very complex issues, but let's set a little bit of context. So here we are in the Greater Marathon County region. We're in a talent desert. We have limited population here. We're not growing by leaps and bounds. If you're not growing, you're shrinking. We have a labor participation rate that is starting to decrease. Now we are at about 64%. So with an unemployment rate of about 2% and a labor force participation rate shrinking downwards towards the 60 percentile, it means that we have full participation where we can in the workforce, but there are still barriers to overcome for people to be engaged in our economy, working in our businesses. And I can tell you that when it comes to childcare, it is at a state level an impediment for workforce development in all 72 counties, not just Marathon County, but all 72. And so when we look at this, nearly 80% of businesses throughout the state of Wisconsin, this comes from the Wisconsin Economic Development Institute study, nearly 80% of businesses acknowledge that the lack of childcare capacity to serve families in the workforce are actually keeping people out of the workforce. And I can tell you this from being a business owner in the past, even in the early 2000s, that when I had a factory, my wife and I had a company, we actually had people who were in the workforce, had children, were not able to come back in and engage in work because they had to stay home for economic reasons to take care of their children. That's happening all throughout the state of Wisconsin. In fact, I'll tell you it's happening throughout the country. And if we're going to address this challenge, we need you, Marathon County government, to help lean into this. The Dream Up initiative is critically important as a private-public partnership pulling together the resources in our community to address this challenge. County government plays a critical role in this. If we are going to address this challenge and to be able to help our businesses compete, not only in a national economy, but a global economy, we have to do everything we can to remove barriers to workforce participation. Childcare is one of those barriers. So what I'm asking you today is that there is good work, strong work being done. We are, from the Chamber of Commerce perspective, we are collecting data. We're collecting data that will start to really understand the acute nature of this problem with our business and industry, from large companies to small and medium-sized businesses. We're asking county government to please stay engaged. This is not a time to step back, but this is a time to lean in, to be a partner to help address this challenge. Together we can make a difference, but once we have the knowledge, the better the data that we will accumulate, and we can bring back to the table that county government has a role. You absolutely have a role. You've done a splendid job of expanding broadband throughout Marathon County. Tremendously important. It can't stop there. It really needs to have a commitment from county government that we have to lean in together, understand the problem, and when we can, bring the resources to bear, of which you will play a role, a hope and an expectation that you will be there to help us, shoulder to shoulder in this community with business and industry. If not, what will happen is it will be a slow, steady demise in a workforce that we need critically for our business growth here. You're a partner in this. We need you to continue to be a partner in it. Housing is going to be another topic where it is critically important. Everything that you do in your committee, education, economic development, housing, childcare, the complexity of challenges in facing this region, this community, are deep, and it's going to require all of us, shoulder to shoulder, hand by hand, to uplift and face this challenge. So with that, I'm asking you, please stay engaged with the Dream Up Challenge. Thank you.
All right, Mr. Chair, the only other slides we had, and they're in your packet, and I'm sure everyone had the opportunity to look at them. Those are the studies that Mr. Ekman referenced, provide some good data on kind of the current state of childcare within Wisconsin and some of the specific impacts within various regions. The other thing I'll say is also within your packet was a letter from the Greater Wausau Prosperity Partnership talking about kind of echoing some of the same concerns that Mr. Ekman referenced relative to economic development and that kind of interrelationship with childcare. I'm not going to go over the key points that the childcare providers left you with. Again, I'm just going to end with I think if there were a simple solution to this, we would do a thing that I'm certainly not too proud to do, and that's rip off and duplicate. If we had that, we could certainly do that. I see Kelly's got her hand up.
Excuse me, Lance, could we have the perspective of Wausau School District
Oh, sure, absolutely.
as well?
Come on up.
Sorry. Thank you.
Come on up, and Diana, and offer that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Diana White. I'm the Communications and Marketing Coordinator for the Wausau School District. I just want to take a couple minutes of your time to talk a little bit about how the lack of childcare is impacting us. In fact, it's a situation that's getting progressively worse. And what I mean by that is we're continuing to lose amazing staff because they cannot find childcare for their little ones. Or we're needing to find alternative means to keep them employed while they look for childcare, and that might look like a leave of absence. So I'll just share with you two very brief stories that really give some perspective to what I'm talking about. Just a couple of weeks ago, we had a long-term employee come to us very excited to say that she had been waiting to adopt a child and finally got that call to bring her little boy home. She immediately started looking for childcare, and as you could imagine, could not find anyone, no spaces open. So she was just heartbroken, excited to have this baby, but struggling because she couldn't find anyone to care for him. And she did not want to stop teaching. In fact, that's the last thing that she wanted to do. So she's currently on a leave of absence until she finds childcare. Last summer, we hired a new teacher who was just thrilled to accept the position and work for the district. She ran into one problem: no childcare, and she had no family in the area who could help. So she did what she thought the only choice was, and that was to call us and unaccept her position. Heartbreaking for her and heartbreaking for us at a time when we're struggling to find teachers and staff, just like so many other businesses. So these are just two stories of many. And before I came here, we ran some numbers, and I'll just read them for you. This fall, we have one staff member not returning because of a lack of childcare. We have another on a leave of absence, the one that I mentioned. 3 more who have now declined offers, and another 3 who have expressed concern and worry about who will watch their kids in the fall, as we have thousands of kids come into our schools to get an education. Now, these are just some of the staff members who have expressed concern as childcare being a reason, and we have every reason to believe there are many more. Like so many other organizations, we're having ongoing conversations about how we can be part of the solution. So as those continue, we will keep you informed about where we're at and be part of as many committees that we can be to help with the crisis that exists. With that, I'll answer any questions. Otherwise, thank you for your time.
Any questions from the committee? Ann?
Thank you. I was one of those teachers in the Wausau School District, and when I had my littles, I struggled to find childcare, and that was, back in the, a while ago. Anyway, what I'm wondering about is Stephanie mentioned needing to invest in staff, and I'm unclear, is this just boosting up their wages, or are we looking also at training to get some high quality degrees, let's say, in there so that we can move them up the career path?
Both. And offering, more benefits package, retirement. Not many childcares have retirement. Paid time off. We have paid time off, but you don't have staff to cover the paid time off, so then nobody gets time off.
So follow up, is there some sort of organization, maybe it would be statewide, where there's a consortium where childcare agencies could partner up with to offer those plans? I mean, I'm not thinking that individual homes can, or smaller childcare facilities can do that, but I'm just wondering what the role is of I don't even know what the right terminology would be, but I know that's maybe not the county's issue, but it could be a good idea.
But to have a consortium that would have affordable health care, so it's one thing to offer health care, but it has to be something that's affordable by somebody who's being paid $15 an hour. The other thing that we are looking at is providing professional development for our people. There's also a cost to that to prevent burnout, to keep them excited, to keep them engaged, to retain them as employees. So that's another place that we are spending money.
I think you'd also be pleasantly surprised to know that many child care providers have credit-based education. I mean, I think I saw statistics about 85% of child care providers have education beyond a high school diploma. I mean, that's pretty impressive for being paid $15, $13 an hour.
Can I just make a comment on the workforce piece? Is that okay?
Sure.
I've been part of the Dream Up group since it began. I'm the county representative there. But one thing that I haven't heard much in Marathon County, but I attended an economic development committee meeting in Wood County yesterday, and they had, I think it was 2 employers reach out to their community development department and were concerned that they are seeing early retirements so grandparents can care for their grandchildren. And that's something that we've not really even touched on here. So it's not just young people leaving the workforce, it's now people retiring early, all of that institutional knowledge leaving so they can care for their grandkids, which I thought was very interesting. And then just to put in perspective the cost to people, I have a child in childcare right now. With the Child Care Counts funding ending, we've been told to expect a 20 to 40% increase in cost for her to be there. She's 2 years old. So right now, we're currently paying $216 a week, so that's just over $11,000 a year. That, with a 40% increase, will go to over $15,000 a year for a 2-year-old. And now, we will have 2. We will have an infant and a 2-year-old in childcare, and so that comes out to, if it is in fact a 40% increase, just over $34,000 a year. And so if you look at the median household income, In Marathon County, it's $63,000. So over half of a household, medium household income in Marathon County is going to childcare if they have 2 kids. So we talk about the numbers were up there, but I just really want to drive home, this is what it's costing the people who live here in our communities to send their kids to care and continue to work to drive our economy.
Thank you. Any other comments? Mr. Leonard?
I only have one more slide after this, and I won't belabor the points here. The challenge in front of your committee is a significant one. As I said before, and as everyone said, this is a complex challenge. The good news, you're not alone. There are a lot of communities every community is having these conversations, which is a good thing. We can learn from each other and identify those opportunities, because my sense, as is the case with things that I deal with, I try to find analogies in our own work, right? Our everyday work. At the county, we have a lot of complex institutions under our umbrella. Well, those things require complex collaborative solutions. And I don't think the child care piece is any different. I think it's important for you to kind of understand that context, which I hope some of the presentation has given you here today from the people that are on the part of that Dream Up group. I think it's also important, kind of building on the comments that Supervisor Van Cree referenced, and going back to an earlier slide, at our Dream Up group, we talked a lot about, we spent an inordinate amount of time trying to get to that original, kind of our goal statement, right? And it really, this is my characterization of it, it came down to really providing a community where people have the opportunity for choice. They can make the choice that is best for them. And, I like to think I think deeply about data. And one of the things, you saw all those trend lines, right? Regulated childcare slots going down, the regulated providers going down. Those are telling. However, I think one other piece makes them perhaps more important or more telling, and that is, I can certainly appreciate, as was shared in one of the stories, right, when people don't have family locally, family affords them the opportunity to do things that won't end up on those charts. I mean, that's an unregulated childcare provider if you're a grandparent or a family member is local and they can provide care. They're already providing care for perhaps another child in the family, and they can do that. That's not going to show up on that chart. So how do we know the situation is still dire? It's the waiting lists that Kelly referenced before. When your waiting list is growing from, at the Y, when it's 18 to now 18 months to 2 years, that tells you above all else, people would make a choice to take their child somewhere, but because of just a lack of availability, not even getting into the cost piece, just a lack. Those are people who have, as Supervisor Van Cree referenced, they have the conscious mindset of, I'm going to pay, but still the slots aren't available. So this is it's a complex challenge. And we just wanted to end with, here are the some connections, other connections to your strategic plan, other than the ones that call for you to look at both housing and childcare. But this is an issue certainly on the economic development front, and I know Dave Ekman and Dale Knapp have been in front of the full county board before, talking about just general workforce challenges. This is a much more deeper dive in one specific area. Talking about demographics more broadly, there's quite honestly a shortage of people to perform a great many duties, as particularly skilled areas. So the challenge is significant. I will say, should you choose to, as was alluded to before, kind of lean in and evaluate kind of what options you have. I mean, staff can look at and provide you with kind of a la carte menu of options, not to say you need to do any one of them. I know your last meeting, just to talk about a couple, you talked about, and I think it's a valid question. We had a couple slides about regulation. The county doesn't regulate childcare. That is, as Kelly referenced, every state in the country has the obligation to really set up those regulations. You can ask the state to take a look at that. That's an easy thing. I don't know if that yields results, but you can also do some innovative things, as Mr. Ekman referenced. Lean in with local businesses, see what see what opportunities for public-private partnership exist. Because as Kay referenced from the Wausau Child Care, there are spaces that are currently could be utilized with very little, if any, renovation, but we have a workforce issue, which, to bring it full circle back to the Dream Up group, that is why that group, the lion's share of that budget went to retention of staff. It's keeping the staff, the childcare staff we had. That was what the group came to. Broad consensus, I would say, if it wasn't unanimous, it was right on the edge. I think it was unanimous that needed to be the focus of where that money went, and the county board approved that initial approach. So that's the background. Happy to have our group answer any questions. I'm probably the least well suited to do that, but if you do ask for staff to come up with some solutions as to or potential avenues, we can do that. HR Finance and Property has asked staff to do that more on the internal side, and I'm working on that right now. But that's kind of where we are, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Is there any questions for Administrator Leonard?
I have a question and comment. Supervisor Baker.
Go ahead, Dave.
So I certainly think that the lack of childcare and the cost of childcare is a significant issue. I don't want to minimize that in any way. Part of it is just the simple economics of, to be able to pay childcare providers a good wage and still have good childcare, meaning limiting the number of children that are cared for by each provider. There's just some economic fundamentals there that are going to be difficult to get around without someone other than the parents paying for that childcare. I mean, that's been a point that's been made by many of the speakers at this meeting and previous meetings. The point has also been made that childcare is different than babysitting. I don't remember us discussing that it was the same as babysitting, but and there's an element of education in that. So it almost appears that a suggestion has been made that the school system start earlier than what it starts now. I mean, they may not have gotten to that point, but that's the end. If you're saying we're educating children, we should be paid as much as kindergarten teachers, well then, that should perhaps be, and I'm not suggesting this, but then if you could follow that argument, that should perhaps be part of the public school system and be paid for through the public school system, in which case that's not a county board issue. And, we're looking at what is the role, if any, of the county board, in the county government, not the county board, but the county government in this topic. And one thing that, we've heard repeatedly, as I mentioned, is that we need to have someone pay for childcare other than the parents to make it affordable and economical. And the federal government has come up with some numbers that, I don't believe it's the federal government's role to determine what's affordable childcare, but so we've been given numbers from the federal government. But basically, I think that we can say, I think this is a core issue of our discussion, and I think we should discuss this early on, because I believe that there's, idea that Marathon County is going to subsidize childcare using property tax dollars or sales tax levy. And I think we can say that is not going to happen. And maybe we decide that it does happen, but I'm saying that's a core issue in this discussion. Is Marathon County going to use property taxes? Is that our role? Use sales taxes to subsidize childcare? It seems to me that people, are basically asking us to do that. Maybe I'm misinterpreting that, but I think we should put that on the table and discuss it. We're not going to do it, or we are willing to do it. I mean, I'm not in favor of that, but if the board decides that's what they would like, that's fine. But we can talk about, we need more money and the county should be, participating and providing, but I don't think we're at a point where we can provide property taxes or sales tax funding or childcare. Let's have that discussion. The same way with the ARPA funds. We've had some supervisors that have suggested that we use ARPA funds to subsidize childcare. And that, maybe we decide to do that. It's a very short-term solution. There's not much time with that. I again think that we've decided to use that for capital spending, and that's a good use of ARPA funds. But, is that something that we think is appropriate to use ARPA funds? And if Lance would, want to weigh in on whether he thinks there's room in the budget to subsidize childcare out of our tax levy or property levy, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Baker. Chairman Gibbs?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I think there's several things here. And one, Marathon County and government is an employer. And we need to step back and say, where is the challenges in childcare? And we've heard many of those challenges. Where's the opportunities? Now, some of it, I think, lends itself to businesses potentially coming together and potentially subsidizing childcare in their businesses. I think that's already being looked at in various aspects. I think that's probably something that, in some cases, businesses are willing to provide the facilities. Although we heard today that some facilities, have room, but not the individuals. But I think there's at least room for discussion about whether or not that Marathon County, being a major employer in the county, 700 plus full-time employees, and then you add to that North Central Healthcare, which is another 800 some employees, and challenges with recruitment in all of those. And one of the impediments that we've heard to employment throughout is the access to childcare. I think Marathon County has to have a discussion about what its role is in whether that is subsidizing childcare for its own employees, or whether and that then potentially frees up businesses to look at subsidizing childcare for their employees. But it's going to have to be a discussion that we have, because we cannot continue to deliver services to the citizens of this county without people in positions. And we're seeing those positions being, multiple positions down in North Central Healthcare. I can give you just one, is got a 40% vacancy. So we have plenty of challenges to look at. And I think there's room for at least discussion about what that role is and whether that's subsidy in providing facility. I don't know that it's providing direct dollars, but if we have facilities that are potentially usable, maybe that's a option or a discussion point at least.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
I would like to respond. Yes, please.
Yeah. Supervisor Baker, go ahead.
So my comments were solely focused on external childcare, not internal childcare. That's outside the purview of our charter, I believe. That's outside our jurisdiction. I was only speaking about external childcare. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to speak if I'm able to.
Back here.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Supervisor Baker and Chairman Gibbs. Well, Supervisor, I don't know, sorry. For wanting to keep this conversation going, because that is actually the most important thing that can go forward from all of us leaving this room. There is a time clock ticking down right now, and we have to respond with something soon. There are, I believe I've said it before, there are other organizations who are working to see how we can provide immediate support to the child care providers that are right now. And a lot of the things that you brought up, Supervisor Baker, are things that are going to take years to be put into place, and it's going to be too late by then. So again, I do appreciate that you have thought about this as the county's role for the non-county government employees. But some things that you can do is talk to your business friends. You can help educate the people who are in your district. You can participate in hosting childcare conversations. You can do all kinds of things as a county government representative. That doesn't necessarily mean dollars up front, because one of the biggest issues that we have are some of the larger employers that we have, and even smaller ones, don't realize that the reason that they can't hire people is because of the lack of childcare. That's still a huge issue, even though we've been kind of like banging on everybody's door about it. Yeah, so that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann?
I just wanted to respond about using ARPA. I think if we invest in people's education, you can't take education away. Dr. Toms probably would agree with that. And so if we were to decide as a body that maybe some of our ARPA funding could be used to train more people, I think the supply side of the child care problem needs to be addressed. And so I would think it would be appropriate. I do understand, though, that wages have to go up because we can't compete with people like Quick Trip. But I will say, 30 years of teaching, it was my calling. I knew it wasn't going to, win me lots of money, but I needed to do it because that was where my heart was. So I think there are people out there that if we were to train them, they could stay, especially if they get that advanced degree.
Chairman Gibbs, you have a response?
I'll just say this, that, if Marathon County sits at the table and at least has discussions about even its internal child care needs from its workforce, that potentially frees up also additional spaces or slots for child care outside. And so I think at least having those discussions with businesses in where there's opportunity to look at, I think is absolutely imperative that we do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Are you able to hear me, Supervisor Seifelt?
I just wanted to address the comment about maybe four-year-old care being in the school district. That would break childcare completely. Just so everyone is aware, that's at the state already. Childcare makes, it can break even after about 3 years old. So if you take the 4-year-olds and you put them in an all-day school program, childcares will go under completely, regardless of what we decide here. So if that's on the table, take it off, because it would not help at all.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing none. Well, for me, it's we definitely have to get out and talk to the other businesses, and explain to them and say, hey, if you don't provide child care, you're not going to get the workers. And they probably know that already, but we're going to have to get businesses involved and do an internal child care down the road. That's probably going to be sooner than later. Who knows? Okay, thank you.
Hi, Elsa Duranzo again. I just wanted to touch a little bit more on the ARPA funding. If you all have even a little bit of an inkling that you might be open to considering funding any sort of support for childcare, we have plans already. We were trying to write for the before the cutoff, and when the regulations for the federal reporting went in and it was taken off of the website, we missed it by like a couple of days. We already have plans and ideas that we would love to share with you if you'd be open for it. That would be great. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Supervisor Rosenberg.
Lance, you said you could provide, or staff would look into I forget how you describe, a menu of, not easily done, but is that possible for you to do that?
Sure. I think as Elsa just referenced and Kelly alluded to before, I mean, there was a lot of thought about what are the various things that people, that Marathon County could try. Not saying that, I don't weigh in on, what policy direction you're going to take. I'll give you the operational challenges I see, but, we can come up with that, for lack of a better term. I did allude to a menu, like, hey, here are some kind of broad policy directions you can go, and we can bring that back to you. I certainly have been taking notes as you've been discussing about, how do we ensure we're at the table sitting down with businesses and kind of having an education role in terms of educating businesses about the challenges, working with businesses to identify solutions, to bring down the cost of care that is passed on then to families, because I think that's one of the areas that people are talking about. You can't just, I think Supervisor Baker alluded to this, there's some economic flaws in the system that, you can't just pass along the full cost to the consumer and have the consumer bear it for a number of reasons. I don't think that's a comment on the quality of my comments I'm making, the fact that the alarm's going off, but it's an opportunity for us to kind of lay those out for you. We can do that. I've been doing that, putting together a presentation for HR Finance on the internal side about kind of what are the things that we're doing to alleviate childcare pressures internally as an employer, things like flexible work environments, and having a flexible spending account. There are a lot of other things that we can look into and investigate. One of them about Supervisor Baker's point, can we utilize, moving beyond should we, but the threshold, or moving back, I should say, to the threshold, can you, as I frequently have said before the county board and your committee and others, you are a creature of state government, unlike cities that have home rule and have all the powers that they wish to exercise that are not expressly prohibited by the state of Wisconsin. You are the opposite. You only have those authorities that the state has given to you. So Chapter 59 lays out where you can put your money. We can look into whether or not tax levy or sales tax funds can be deployed in those fashions and kind of come back with that. But there are other avenues, as I think was alluded to by Chair Gibbs, and it builds on what Kay Palmer referenced. If we can address the workforce issues, are there facilities that are available to allow people to expand in a more cost-effective way? We can bring back kind of that menu for you to look at. And I think that's some direction that could come out of here today, not only with respect to childcare, but if you do move into having the housing discussion, we can do a similar thing about housing, because they're both very complex and communities are trying a lot of things. We can, and probably work with Jeremy from Extension to bring together a list of, broadly speaking, all the things people are trying, and then you guys can talk about what do you think we should try.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Leonard. Any other questions? Yes, go ahead.
Hi again, it's Kelly from Child Caring. And Lance, I would just encourage that child caring be a part of the conversations. We are working currently with Wood County as an example, and there was talk of increasing sales tax to help support child care. They still are very interested in using their ARPA dollars to support child care efforts in that county. And there are several other counties around the state that I think are really stepping up, and so we would love to share that type of information with you as well. So thank you. I appreciate the fact that you're willing to do some research on that.
Okay, thank you. I know we got affordable housing here, but I'm going to bypass that till the next meeting and maybe discuss affordable housing a little more closer. Save on time here. So moving on to number 7, educational presentation and comments discussion. 7A, UW Extension Program and Budget Overview. Jeremy.
present, won't it? Maybe. Where is it? There. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Jeremy Solon, Area Extension Director. Thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit more about the Marathon County UW-Madison Extension program and budget. This came out of a request from last committee meeting, so hopefully the details in here meet that request. Most of the details of the kind of program outcomes and participation come out of the annual report, which is also in the packet. And I'm just going to kind of quickly go over things since you've all had a chance to see that in the packet. Can refer to that, but I'm happy to obviously answer questions and go through anything in detail. So program areas that we have in Marathon County are agriculture, horticulture, a little bit of natural resources, our FoodWise program, and 4-H. Things are slightly complicated in how things are set up, in that some of these positions are fully county funded, some of them are co-funded with the state, and some of them have no county funding at all. So I'll talk about those at the end, kind of where the funding comes from. But know that we have kind of representation of all these program areas here in Marathon County. I'll talk about kind of this, in most cases, the specific kind of outcomes within the county delivered by the folks who are here in the county, but there's also another layer of that we have state specialists and statewide programs who are also delivering services to Marathon County that aren't necessarily specifically represented here, but I'll touch on some of those as we go through. So I'm just going to go through each of these. I'll talk about the programming efforts within each program. I'll talk about participation and impacts, and then work my way through. So agriculture, these are the types of programs that are offered. We have a full-time educator in Marathon County, primarily focused on dairy, as you can see in the programming. And she provides particular specialization within basically reproduction management of dairy herds, but there's a wide range of aspects of that program. The numbers that I'm sharing program participation wise, just keep in mind are last year's, since those are the numbers we have. She had 541 program participants in those programs that she offered. Number of different ways that we measure impact. We do evaluations of programs on the individual level, so we can get into those more if you're interested. But one of the key things with the dairy program is improved herd health, so and increased production. And in particular with the dairy program, she works with smaller farms who don't necessarily have access to these services on their own, saving them money and improving their herds. Horticulture, the horticulture educator is a 70% position here, and this is one that's fully county funded. That position primarily focuses on therapeutic horticulture, so working with folks involved in the justice system, community service, drug court, kind of programming in that area, but also does other general public outreach. Gaining Ground Garden is the kind of primary emphasis there, working with addict services. Over the past year, 150 participants in those programs. One of the things that it can be a challenge from an evaluation impact standpoint is that some of these programs take a long time to see impacts, right? So working with the therapeutic side of this, with folks involved with the justice system, kind of the first step of that is just to get people involved and engaged in their community service and continuing to show up for that. And so that seems like a very small thing, but is a huge step in their process in engaging with those programs. So the hours involved with addict services are a big part of that. We have lots of kind of individual stories of impact there, showcasing the value of individuals engaging with growing food and landscaping and developing green industry skills. as a way for them to develop obviously skills, but also personal confidence, just general life skills of being consistent and on time and taking care of themselves and others. So in addition to that, there's also statewide efforts within horticulture. You see some of the kind of broader public participation aspects of that. And then Master Gardeners is a program that's connected to horticulture. Janelle, our educator, doesn't directly provide services to Master Gardeners at the county level, but we do that at the state level. So this is one of those examples of how state level programs support the local community. So within Marathon County, we have over 2,700 hours volunteered by Master Gardeners in the past year, working with 11 organizations. So lots of good work going on there as well. FoodWise program. So FoodWise is primarily nutrition education program. This is a program that's fully state funded using federal funds. And so this is a program that the county doesn't provide any, or at least minimal financial support to. The focus of the program, like I mentioned, is nutrition education. That happens both at the community level and in schools. There's also additional aspects to that. Strong Bodies is a fitness program for older adults. There's been some work in farmers markets, and then kind of larger level work kind of related to the conversation we just had about childcare. If you think about the need to change policies and systems, that need also exists within the food access and nutrition realm. And so we have staff working on that level of work as well. So that's the poly systems and environment. Program participation here. Those participants primarily have come at the community level. We haven't had as much school-based nutrition education over the past year. That will shift this coming year as we bring a new educator on board. But also, again, farmers market work, connecting with local farms to address food needs. Natural resources. This is also a program that the county doesn't provide a lot of direct support for, but our program manager for the water and forestry education programs is based here in Marathon County, even though she works statewide. And we have educators based in other counties that work in this area. But so I included some of this just, again, as kind of a impact that Extension as a whole has, but work on water quality issues with EPIC and with some of the other farmer-led groups, and then doing forest landowner education, both as a way to get involved in management to make sure their forests are healthy, but also how the Your Land, Your Legacy is about how forest land is passed down to the next generation. And you can see participation here. Most of these are statewide numbers, and some of them coming from Marathon County because those classes are held here. And then finally, 4-H, probably the most recognizable extension program. And within that realm, we do the traditional membership programming where youth are involved in their clubs and programs. But we also have Juntos, which is a program specifically aimed at Latinx families and helping them to access higher education resources. 4-H Foodie, which obviously focuses on food and kind of food preparation skills and food access. We also do a lot of work in after-school programs, both during the school year and during the summer. And then we also do programs just for the general public, which we call community programs. And I also included in here the 4-H AmeriCorps program. We actually have 4 AmeriCorps right now, but that's been an ongoing program where we bring in primarily students either in college or just after high school through the AmeriCorps program to support 4-H as well. And we've talked about this one a few times, but that program continues to grow. We're up over 1,000 members now, and continue to see pretty good growth in that program. The little flower on the right side there, that's the kind of developmental model that 4-H uses to kind of scaffold impact with youth. And there is ongoing evaluation for this at the statewide level and local level. In the annual report, there's kind of a full documentation of the evaluation that was done here last year. But I just included the header slide that looks at overall program quality. But the evaluation gets into impact on youth as far as, are they finding support among peers? Are they getting excited about potential career pathways? Are they finding connections with supportive adults? All of those kind of things. So you can see the program here in Marathon County is doing very well. All right, so then into the budget. So this is current year budget numbers. Basically set this up, breaking down the county budget compared to state funding that's provided to the positions and then other outside funding that's brought in. What I'll say about this is these are generally, round numbers. Like, I'm pretty close, pretty sure they're close to within a few dollars, but they're, probably not exact, especially on the outside funding and things like that. The county funding column, that includes the contracted fees, so the educators that are co-funded, there's contract with UW, and then it also includes the county operational support and things like IT support and things like that. So that's a cumulative number in the county category. And then state funding, that includes the additional kind of expenses, costs for the educators. So what's not covered by the counties, covered by the state. That varies by the salary of the educator, right? So a new educator, that split is pretty much 50-50. For an educator that's been here for a long time, the state covers more of those costs. And then there's random other state funding in there. What I didn't include much of in here, so it's a little bit of an underrepresentation of things like professional development and other related equipment costs that might come from specific projects. So that's not represented in there. It's not a significant amount. And then other funding is specifically outside partner funding, whether those are through grants or donations or whatever it might be. So so in the case of 4-H, we have 1.5 FTE. So the county provides co-funding for one of those positions. And then the 4-H associate, we have outside funding from the Leaders Federation for that. So that's the majority of that $38,000. Plus we have the AmeriCorps members that we talked about. So that's additional funding that we brought in that's not county funding. Horticulture, that's a fully county funded position. Agriculture is co-funded. Again, with a little bit of outside money that's brought in. Natural resources, I only represented 10% of that position just because she works statewide and only does a little bit of programming here. The only county funding that's provided for that is a little bit of IT support, basically. The rest of that is state funding. Food-wise, again, that's fully state funded with the exception of a little bit of IT support. That's 1.5 FTE that represents full-time educator, program coordinator who works in 4 counties, so that's 25% here, and then the healthy community coordinator who works in the 4 counties as well. So that's where that state funding calculation comes from. And then the administrative, that is 1 full-time office assistant that is funded through the county, but actually through the state contract. And then a quarter of my time, which is fully paid by the state. And then there's some other outside funding as part of that, a little bit of administrative support. So that is the budget by individual program, and this is how it breaks down overall. So of the total funding for programs happening in Marathon County, the county is providing about 45% of that funding. State is about a little bit over 45%, and the rest is outside funding. So with that, again, hopefully that provided the detail as requested of our current budget, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the programming or the budget.
Is there any questions for Jeremy? I do have one, Jeremy. Is there any positions, whether it's a half or a quarter, that are not filled in the county, in surrounding counties that we work with?
So are there any vacant?
Right.
There are not right now. We're completely full with what we have. There has been, in the past in Marathon County, there has been a community development educator. And I've inquired about the, potential to bring that back at kind of multiple levels. Unfortunately, within extension, we're full. We've allotted all of the positions that are available for community development in other counties. But we're looking at different strategies to address some of those needs. I know we've had some conversations about some needs within the county. Lance and Chris and Chair Gibbs and other committees have come up with requests, and we're not able to fulfill those right now, kind of from a strategic planning standpoint or the housing, a bunch of these things that continue to come up. But there are discussions happening in Extension right now about how do we provide services, educational programming services to counties that don't have an educator in them, given we don't have any possibility of adding educators right now because of state funding.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No?
I have a comment.
Go ahead.
So I made the request for the presentation, and it was very informative, and I appreciate it, and thank you.
Oh, you bet. Glad to hear. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah.
Moving on to 7B, Historical Society presentation. Russell Wilson and his crew. My knowledge of names isn't very good here today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm Russ Wilson. I'm president of the Board of Directors of the Marathon County Historical Society. I'm accompanied by two people, Professor Brett Barker, who's in the back and will come up and will have some words after I get through my presentation, and Ben Clark, who's going to work this slideshow for me. And I will say this, when we put the slideshow in from the materials in your electronic packet, this PowerPoint is a little tweaky. It condensed a few slides, it deleted a couple of headings, so you're probably going to be a little better off if you follow along in the materials that you have in your electronic packet. But let me just introduce these folks. Brett Barker is the chair of the Department of History and International Studies at UW-Stevens Point. He began teaching history at UW Marathon County back in 2004. He got his bachelor's and his master's from Ohio State University, his PhD from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's been on our board of directors since 2009. And folks, if you haven't heard him, he is a rock star. He has his following. He has people my age who audit his classes. That's what an engaging lecturer he is. And we also have here Ben Clark. He is one of our staff archivists and historians. Ben is a local boy from Wausau East. He got his bachelor's in history from UWSP. He's been with us for about 8 years, and during that time, Ben has obtained his master's degree in history with a certification in public history from UW-Eau Claire. And if you've had a chance to listen to History Speaks or History Chats, then you know that Ben is a rock star in his own right. He's got people who follow him as well. Ben, you want to take us to the contract?
Sure.
So there's a contract for services. I won't spend much time on this at all. And by the way, I mean, you folks have a long day ahead of you. I'm going to try to be as brief as I can be. But what we do at Marathon County Historical Society is we tell stories. And so there's this contract that we have, and what does it do? It tells the story of the relationship of funding between Marathon County and the Historical Society. So from 1954 to 2019, that funding was on a donation or contribution basis. In 2020, that was converted to an actual contract, a quid pro quo. Our deliverables are set forth in section 2A through D. I'm not going to go through that and read it. And in return, there's $54,376. What I want to say is when Lance and I started working on this, I had the opportunity to do the first draft. And I did that with the newcomer in mind. I was well aware that every 2 years there's an election, that new people come onto the board. They may have zero history, zero context, and I wanted to make sure that within the four corners of that document, newcomers could get the full story of that funding. So it's plain, it's clear, it's brief, it does not have legalese, so before you make any decisions, I would simply ask that you just please read the story in the contract. Next thing, it's actually the very last page in your packet, but I just would like to read it briefly. This is an email. It is from the Outreach Director of the Wisconsin Historical Society. It's dated June 14. It's to our Executive Director. And this is just a short excerpt. Dear Mary, congratulations. I'm delighted to inform you that the Board of Curators of the Wisconsin Historical Society officially approved awarding the 2023 Reuben Gold Thwaites Trophy to the Marathon County Historical Society. The Review Committee and the Wisconsin Historical Society's Board of Curators commend your outstanding work to collect, preserve, and share local history in service to your community. The Reuben Gold Thwaites Trophy is the highest recognition an affiliate organization can receive from the Wisconsin Historical Society. The Marathon County Historical Society's commitment to community service and education through innovative, accessible programming for all ages was noted as a particular strength by the Review Committee. So this is the third time we've won this award. We won it in 1958. We won it in the mid-'80s, and now we've won it in 2023, and we're tickled pink about it. But before you get too excited, no money comes with the trophy. So just, and we do not receive any monetary support from WHS. Okay, if we could go then to this, we've got it up, okay. Again, this one is a little hard to read on your screens. It's probably easier to read on your laptop, but I'm looking at our educational impact report for 2022, our exhibits, past exhibits. So we've recently had Milking Time, Evolution of the Dairy Industry in Wisconsin. That was up for several years. A portion of it, however, remains in our lower level. And if you have family or friends who were farming back in the 1930s, you'll want to see that remnant that's still there. We had Generations of Progress, Industrial History in Marathon County, and then one that's not listed, which was just fascinating, rural electrification in Marathon County, and that one has been converted to a traveling exhibit. Currently, we have our permanent exhibit, which is our stories, the history of Marathon County. I hope everybody here has seen that exhibit, and if not, I hope you will rush down to the Woodson History Center and make sure to see it. We have our Preserve for Generations, Century on the Marathon County Park System. That's a small exhibit up on the second floor, but very interesting. And what we're really excited about is the one that opened just a few weeks ago. That's called A Peek Inside, What We Collect and Why. This is really a fun and informative exhibit. You gotta go see it. The big takeaway from this page is the number that you see, the people that we served in 2022, 20,542 people. 47% of those people were from around the county. That is not, that is outside the city of Wausau. So that number is 9,654. For the sake of convenience, because we're going to come back to that number, let's just call it 9,600 people from around the county. So of the 20,000 plus, 14,373 were served directly, meaning in person, and the other 6,169 were live views on our virtual programs that were offered through the Marathon County Public Library system. We had 73 in-person programs and events. We had 57 of the virtual programs. And among the other things we do or participate in numerous community events, one of which is the Wisconsin Valley Fair, and we'll come back to that. And our Little Red Schoolhouse program, we had 1,484 fourth graders in their curriculum for Wisconsin history, attended the Little Red Schoolhouse from 32 different schools in 66 sessions. And the way that works is when a school, a fourth grade class wants to participate, or a school wants to participate, you get a spring session and a fall session as well. So that's our programming. Our treasures are the records that we have and the physical objects, that is the archives and the artifacts. Our Woodson History Center, 53% of its space is dedicated to the storage and proper preservation of our archives and our artifacts. Of that, 38% of our archival storage contains original documents and records of the Marathon County government. And as this note, the items that we preserve, these are one-of-a-kind items that can't be duplicated anywhere else. Of our artifacts, 30% of those have known direct ties to a town, a village, or a city within Marathon County. During 2022, we had 111 people who came to our research library to conduct research, and 552 people submitted research requests to our historians, and of course, you know, Gary Gisselman, the other one. Those research requests come in by phone and email, and these historians get to work. Our website, which has already in previous years been awarded a prize by or certificate by the Wisconsin Historical Society, was accessed by 28,438 people, and that has it has thousands of records and photographs that are freely available to people, which is an important part of our contract with the county. Let's see, make me just back up one, yeah. So looking at the pie chart that shows the 20,542 people, the orange is that 47% of those folks who came from outside the city of Wausau around the county. In terms of our economic impact, we have 15 part-time employees, which are equivalent to 7 full-time people. On salaries, goods, and services in Marathon County, we spent $420,866.49. And I'm going to kind of skim through some of this. The bottom portion talks about national statistics. We know that museums and historic houses are drivers of tourism and where people want to go. Okay, if we could go to the next one. All right, now we've got 2 pie charts where we've, oh, the headings are up there. Okay, that's good. All right. So remember I said we had 57 virtual programs that had over 6,000 live views. So of those program topics, 13 topics were Anawa, Bevent, Eldorant, Finwood, Halder, Hamburg, Hatley, Knowlton, Marathon County, Marshfield, Pontotoski, Schofield, and Spencer. And from our visitors from around the county who came here in Wausau to us, our visitors came from Cronenwetter, Marathon, Marshfield, Mosinee, Rothschild, Schofield, Spencer, Stratford, and Weston. For our Little Red Schoolhouse, we had schools from Athens, Edgar, Hatley, Marathon, Mosinee, Rib Mountain, Ringgold, Rothschild, Stettin, Stratford, and Weston. So we had those 13 topics, and we had those 11 schools. We go to the next one here. Some of our services include, I want to mention the Traveling Trunks program. It's wildly popular. Our curator of education, Anna Chilson-Straub, has for years taken this antique box, and she prepares a curriculum, a study for a school in the past, and puts together the materials and the artifacts that go along with that. The teacher picks it up. That teacher takes it to school, delivers that lesson, returns it to Anna. That program has been so popular that it is no longer restricted to schools. So that can go anywhere where we give presentations, which is all throughout the county. Civic groups, assisted living homes, nursing homes, pretty much anywhere. We have lots of school visits that come to us. We work especially on History Day. DC Everest, its middle school and its high school have very strong History Day programs, and we work closely with that. We have many collaborators, and I won't go through that, but you can see we collaborate with lots of folks. If you go on to TripAdvisor, and so for 2022, if you enter the search terms attractions in Marathon County, number 3 is the Yawkey House Museum. If you search for museums in Marathon County, number 2 is the Yawkey House Museum, number 3 is the Woodson History Center, and number 6 is the Marathon County Historical Society. We can go to the next one, and I've done these, this one really repeats the statistics, but has a nice picture of the school kids. We'll go on to the next one. And here the term lifelong learning really jumps out at you because we do cover all ages, not only all topics that may relate to Marathon County in some way, but everything from little kids, from tea parties and My Dolly and Me and story time in the garden, again, to assisted living and nursing homes. On Facebook, the public Facebook, we have over 4,700 followers. Stories and photographs are regularly posted there. As I said, our website has been previously recognized as award-winning. We have thousands of records that have been put on there. We have thousands of photographs, and let me just mention this because this is an important part of our contract is digitizing records for free access. And what I want to tell you is it's not like posting, like taking a selfie and posting it on Instagram. It's a boatload of work to receive the box of papers and documents from the family, and the professional archivist or the volunteer sorts through all that and figures, okay, what is really important here? And once you find what's really important here, is inputting all the data that goes with that so that it is retrievable and intelligible, and then placing it onto the website platform and cross-referencing it with other documents, including photographs. So this is a major, major piece of what we do. It's very labor-intensive, time-consuming, and it's an ongoing task. This next slide just says that a lot of people from outside Marathon County come to visit us, and that when you think about the cultural scene in Marathon County, we are the history component of that, and nobody else does what we do. Next one, from last November, you might have recall having seen this slide before. This is that $54,376 and our budget. We allocate 28% of it to our general operations and 12% of it to the Yawkey House Museum budget. And folks, I got to tell you, if we were to lose that money, it would be a big hole in our budget. I mean, we would have to decrease hours of operation, hours of staff employment and services, and certainly including the digitization. So we don't charge for our services, and except for this opportunity, we really haven't thought about, well, what might some dollar values be? And so these are just thoughts, folks, but we know the cost of maintaining our archives and our collections. For the Woodson History Center, that cost is $64,900. Well, if you take 53% of that, where our archives and our artifacts are held, that comes to $34,397. and then the cost for our library and archival staff is $40,000. So just to maintain those archives and artifacts is $74,397. Again, it's just a way of thinking about things. If we think about those 57 virtual program topics, 13 of which were from Anawa to Spencer, I asked our historians, okay, so tell me, when you go to prepare your presentations, what do you think? Given the amount of time and effort you spend on preparing and delivering these things, how would you place a value on this? And what I heard was, well, it's a range, and some of the topics may be quicker and simpler than others. And even if you repeat it, you typically have to update something. Some of them are longer and more complex. They felt a range of from $500 to $1,500 was reasonable for an average of about $1,000. We had 13 of those topics, so that's a $13,000 value figure. With our Little Red Schoolhouse, we had 11 schools from around the county, and of course they got a day in the fall and the day in the spring. I asked several people this, if they thought, what would they think about a value cost of $1,000, and what I got unanimously was, oh my gosh, easily for that. You couldn't possibly hire somebody to come in with that quality of work and do it for that cost. So that one I think is very conservative. For our online records, so our 9,600 people from around the county who were directly served, let's do a couple of assumptions here. And again, folks, these are just thoughts, okay? They're just thoughts. But let's assume each person went on the website once and pulled up a free record once. And that free record, which is the product of a lot of work to get on there, has a value of, say, $2. Well, that would be a value figure of $19,200. And again, I think that one is very conservative. Last one here, I asked our executive director to put up what she feels would be the value for that exhibit of the Marathon County Fair. And I want to give you you can read the bottom line there, but let me just give you a quick little bit of explanation from Mary Forer that she sent me just the other day. Hi, Russ. We have two parts to the fair display each year. The history of the fair, which for the most part is the same every year, but is reviewed for items that may be damaged. Then we also set up several other displays in the exhibition building. We typically have the majority of the wing for our displays. When we consider the time it takes to review the history of the fair exhibit and update it if needed, planning and preparing additional displays to help fill the exhibition building, loading all displays and taking them to the fairgrounds, unloading and installing the displays, working with the fair staff to get access to the building and for fair passes for the staff and volunteers, coordinating volunteers to man the displays during the fair, checking on supplies during the fair, taking down the displays, checking on the condition and fixing anything needed, putting everything away, documenting the popularity of the displays, and make notes for next year. I would say it takes two staff between 25 and 30 days each year. Then there are always supplies, printing, et cetera, as needed. So that's what's behind that $11,000 value figure. And if we go to the summary page, you can see the last 4 items I mentioned tally to $74,200. You put those together with the archival and artifacts, and we're at about $148,000. So, folks, we provide valuable services to Marathon County government and its resident. Nobody else does what we do. We do it with passion, and we are fortunate, and we are very grateful to Marathon County for its support. So as Professor Barker is coming up, let me just say, first of all, the fair is coming up. Please make sure you not only look at that exhibit, watch the other people who are looking at that exhibit. Please come to the Yawkey House Museum if you haven't done so far. Please come to the Woodson House and look at our 3+ exhibits. And if you'd like to come for a special tour, by all means, let us know, and we would love to roll out the red carpet for a special tour.
Hello. As mentioned, I'm Brett Barker. I teach history at UW Stevens Point at Wausau, or you may know it as UW Marathon County, or maybe the center, or maybe the extension, but all those places that I've heard it called over my 21 years here. And I just wanted to briefly, I don't have a full-fledged history lecture planned for you, thank goodness, but I just want to share a couple of brief thoughts about why I think what you're doing and supporting us is so critical, and why it's so valuable, and why it is in many ways a uniting and positive force for this county. First of all, we live in a political climate that is ultimately often very divisive. Aware of that. I'm a Civil War historian by training, so maybe I know we're not in the worst of all divisive times, but still, I see that, and yet I think that funding for the Marathon County Historical Society is one place where we can come together, because some people, as the packet that Russ shared with you said, some people look at the funding as an economic engine. Indeed, it is that. There's good evidence that conservatively, tourism, things spent in ways that come back in things like heritage preservation, a museum, historical society, often has a 7-to-1 multiplier economically. And I think that's important. I think that, one of the things you have to think about is economic development as committee, and I think that we do play a role in that. So if that's the way you think about the value of what we do and our partnership, then I think that's completely valid and good. Others might look more at a cultural value. After all, we are a place, and our heritage is important and worthy of being remembered. We need, as a community, a sense of shared identity that helps save and transmit stories to new generations. I hear complaints constantly, and I think there's validity in them, that many folks, and sometimes this is aimed particularly at young people, although I think all young people maybe don't pay as much attention to their history, but the idea that people don't know our history. Well, I think that is part of a community, is understanding where we've been and where we are and where we're going as a community. And I think that your support has helped the Historical Society tell those stories. In many ways, people most interact and become engaged with history at the local level. I still have students every fall who tell me, as they look out across into the park, about their visit to the Little Red Schoolhouse, often more than a decade earlier, and how much that impacted them, make them see that the world was not always as it is today, that there were a time when their grandparents and their great-grandparents lived that did not look like their world of cell phones and Instagram and all the rest. And so I think that we're an important part of sending that community, that message to the wider community. So if you think of us as helping in that economic development aspect of your mission or in that education mission, I would say you're all right. And maybe there are many other reasons to think about this as a valuable contribution. The second point I wanted to make with you today is specifically part of the contract that has us going out into the county and offering presentations. Russ mentioned the 13 communities that we directly talked about, that we directly interacted with last year. I think that there was an older perception, and I hope that it's less strong than it once was, that we were perceived as the Wausau Historical Society, not the Marathon County Historical Society. And let's be honest, many people have always lived in Wausau, right? It is the county seat, it's the center, and there are important things have gone on here. But I think that one of the things that we've tried really hard to do is to consider the history of the entire county. That dairy exhibit, the parks exhibit, the many ways in which we thought about all the ways in which this community has existed for a long period of time. One of the most interesting and I think the most satisfying parts of the way history has gone in the last few decades is a focus on history being the history of all of us. So yes, the Yawkeys and the Woodsons and DC Everest, they aren't going away from our history. They'll always be a part of that past. But so too are the stories of the farmer from the town of Bergen, right? The lumberjack from Noggart or from along the Eau Plaine River, right? The immigrant who came to northern Marathon County from Stettin in Germany and settled in the town of Stettin here, right? The Pole who settled in the town of Easton, the Hmong immigrant who came to Weston, the indigenous people who lived here for millennia before any of those people arrived. History is about all of those stories, and your support has helped us preserve those stories and tell those stories. I think that has allowed us to accomplish so much in the past, and I hope you'll continue to help us in that support going forward. Marathon County is a great place to live, and part of the reason is the stories that we share and the heritage that we share and preserve together. And so I hope that we can continue to do that. I want to thank you for your past support and look forward to your continuing collaboration as we share and preserve those stories together. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We have any questions from the committee? I do got to say, I was out there a couple weeks ago, and I said, well, I'll allow an hour for myself. Well, 2.5 hours later, I left the Historical Society and did not see everything that I probably could have seen. You have to get out there and take a look. It's Ben and Russ and them out there. You can't believe. You go, they took me in the back room, and I mean, it's up to the ceiling. There's stuff out there, you know, and it's in Marathon County history. And it goes back, you know, 100 years. And they took my background and went back to my ancestors, and I wish probably they wouldn't have went back that far. But you can find your history out there. It was the dairy part. Could not believe the amount of dairy farms that were in each township. You know, there's 50, 60, 70 dairies in each township. Like now in the town of Eldon, we got one. That's it. One dairy. You know, it's phenomenal of the past history. Anybody else want to comment? You got to get out there and take a look. Just go out and take a look at it. There's a lot to see. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi. So Kim Weber, Executive Director of McDevco. So just a high-level overview of what we do. We support business startup and expansion in Marathon County through the following avenues I'll discuss. So gap financing and financing. We have 3 different ways that we can help support financing in Marathon County, one of which is gap financing, where we partner with lead banks to help finance deals that maybe have a low equity share, and we can come in and help fund the balance. with a loan. We also offer microfinancing, and that's only for the city of Wausau at this current moment. These are lower dollar loans at 3% interest, and we're typically funding soft cost items that might be harder for a primary lender to finance. And then the third that we're very excited about, brand new, is the POUTS Private On-Site Wastewater Treatment System Revolving Loan Fund with Marathon County. So we're working to help households throughout Marathon County replace their septic systems with very affordable, low-cost loans. We also offer and had offered COVID-19 grants. So we were the administrator for the Marathon County Microbusiness Grant. We helped dispersed $235,000 to 47 businesses. Each grant was $5,000, so that's very exciting. That program did just end. We still are administering the City of Wausau CARES grants, and we specifically have $2,500 grants for businesses or licensed childcare providers that were operating prior to COVID-19 for items relating to their business, either in IT or childcare. You can see below, this is just some of the programs that we offer this year and where McDevco partnered to help educate those in the small business community. Upcoming in July, we have UW-Madison law students under the supervision of their law professors coming to do a free program at our facility and offer free 30-minute consults to folks in the community that are seeking some free legal advice. We also work with them throughout the years. We get legal questions from our entrepreneurs. And then we'll go into marketing. We seem to offer marketing every year since it changes so much from year to year. And then we transition into our flagship program, the Gear Certificate Program. It's 12 weeks, very high level overview of the items you should consider if you've started your LLC but you haven't launched your business, or if you're considering launching. We're happy to report we're up from 10% to 30% success in launch post-graduation. It doesn't mean the other 70% aren't successful in launching. Sometimes it means, hey, you know what, I need to pare down that idea, or I need a little more time, or I need to consider this. And we continue consulting after that. We continue to host quarterly municipality meetings, and we do manage the business incubator at the industrial park. So a couple highlights here. We're at 87% for May, stayed consistent in June. Manufacturing is full, and we have a handful of offices left. And we've really started to leverage the ecosystem of how this incubation should work. So we've been partnering with our tenants to talk about how do we help finance you once you're ready to transition out, bringing in some municipality partners to talk about how they can support that transition and what that might look like. So just really trying to help our businesses grow out of our four walls and then transition new businesses in. Any questions?
Is there any questions for Kim? No, we are getting into hour 2.5 already, but sorry about
I'll make
that.
it fast.
Yeah, library.
Hi. Yes, in the interest of brevity, I'll just say that since the report was submitted, that's the previous month's highlights, we are in full swing at the Summer Library Program. It is wild and crazy and lots of fun. We've had hundreds and hundreds of children and parents attend our programs, and I think we're about halfway through. So we still have lots and lots of programs, story times, crafts, educational events, and otherwise exciting things to do all summer long at the library and at all of our locations. And then I just want to plug a couple of things that are upcoming. One is the Friends Members Only book sale. That happens monthly, and the upcoming one is Saturday, July 15th. You need to be a member to attend those special sales, so you get all of the best stuff, but you can go to the sale before you're a member, and if you find something you want to buy, it's just $10 to get a membership, and you can get great deals on all of the things there. Also, just a reminder that the Library Card Pool Day is Thursday, July 20th, so you can go to public pools and access them for free with your library card on Thursday, July 20th. One other thing, we have a special story time at 3M Park on Monday, July 24th at 10 a.m. We're doing story times at parks all summer long. That's the next one coming up. And on an internal point, we have a 20-hour library assistant at Marathon City. That position is open for applications and will close on July 21st. Any questions?
Any questions for Leah? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sounds like everybody's busy. So, okay, moving on to UW Extension Monthly Report. Jeremy.
All right, thank you again. Few quick updates. You have the educator report in your packet. The one thing I'll note about that is at the end, we just started adding this month additional programming that's happening in Marathon County that isn't necessarily by the educators here. So those are, again, outside specialists or educators in other counties that are offering programs here. So that's what that is. But the most important highlight of update of the day is an introduction to a person you don't need an introduction to necessarily, but we're excited to welcome Michelle as our new Foodwise Healthy Communities Coordinator. She's working in the same 4 counties that I do, so in addition to Marathon, Clark, Wood, and Portage counties. And we're excited to have her on board. We do just want to touch on any potential concerns about conflict of interest, given her other role at this point. And so a reminder, she's in a position that's not county funded, so it's a Foodwise position. She doesn't have any budget authority or kind of decision-making authority that would intersect with her county role. So just wanted to be clear about that. Both of us are very cognizant of that, and we'll continue to, make sure we kind of separate those interests. But with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle to kind of say hi, and you can talk a little bit about your role and things moving forward. So.
Feels a little strange to introduce myself to you since you all know who I am, but people probably don't actually know what my background is in. So if you read the report from Jeremy, I do have a degree in horticulture, and I've worked in food systems and community outreach pretty much my whole career. So this brings me kind of back to the agriculture and food side of things. I've been with the city of Wausau for the last 6 years, so I'm excited to make a change and see what's going on in other counties, which is very interesting so far. But I'm looking forward to it, and I think it should be a good thing for me, good thing for Marathon County.
Thank you, Michelle. Welcome aboard.
And then and if there are questions for Michelle, we come back to those too. But one other just quick note. I have a request in and confirmation of availability for the next committee meeting for a housing presentation. So we have an educator in Bayfield County who's focused on housing. And so she's available for the next committee meeting to come and share the work that's happening there and extension resources that are available statewide. So we'll have that at the next meeting as well. Yeah, happy to take questions.
Yeah, so, and Jeremy, you remind me of that too, because I went through my emails and I said, what is this? Oh yeah, we talked about it. Yeah, okay. Any questions for Jeremy? Okay, UWSP, I don't blame her for leaving. You all know, you got what's in the packet. Now we will move back up to number 5, policy issue discussion and potential committee determination. 5A, continued discussion regarding the 2024 annual budget and policy recommendations for the committee. I don't need to read the 3, but okay, where are we at here now? Administrator Leonard.
I don't know if I can, that's a broad question. Where are we? But, one thing, you did just hear a more of an in-depth presentation from one of the nonprofits that receives funding through the county annual budget process. You've previously received presentations from, and you do earlier today, and you receive them every month from McDevco. One of the things, just to draw back to your last full county board meeting, one of the things that came out of the budget priority discussion was an amendment to the initial draft document to call for each of the standing committees to make formal recommendations for consideration to the full board of whether or not to continue that funding. And there was reference previously at that board meeting to some presentations and discussion at public safety. So certainly, should you wish to provide for, or recommend, I should say, to the county board that funding for the nonprofits that kind of are underneath your purview, that it be continued or modified, you can do that. I think it's properly agendized for today. It's under policy, and it's broad enough to allow you to consider that action. But broadly speaking, in terms of where we are, if you do have questions relative to any of the areas underneath this committee's jurisdiction, happy to bring those individuals back at a future meeting, because it looks like everyone has left from each of the other departments. But again, you're a little bit unique in that the library has the library board, as we've talked about before, and you can provide input to them as they bring forward their budget recommendations. But certainly those nonprofits that I referenced before, I think are properly agendized for discussion and any action you would choose to take today.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. So, as a nonprofit, we, support, say, $70,000 to a nonprofit. It's in our jurisdiction for the committee. Do we say, okay, we want to keep supporting the 70,000, and we can say we want to deduct it or improve it or add more to a nonprofit?
I'll give you I think that's a question for, you're looking in my direction. I'll give you my 2 cents. I think you have that broad discretion. And if you want to know the specific amounts of funding, I know Mr. Wilson referenced that today for the Historical Society. That is one of those areas directly underneath your, within your ordinance section. It refers to other organizational relationships, and it indicates that you serve as Marathon County's liaison to those organizations. Ultimately, of course, the allocation of funds is a question for the full board, but I think I think what was envisioned, how I read or have interpreted the amendment to that budget priority document, is that the full board wanted each of the standing committees with jurisdiction to take those formal steps to make recommendations.
Okay, thank you, Administrator Leonard. Good question. You look puzzled to me, Tom.
Which nonprofits do we support besides the Marathon County Historical Society?
I think if Lance could send us that.
It's also McDevco, so certainly McDevco,
Yep.
if you think back to your annual budget document, there are a number of nonprofits. McDevco, Historical Society, Women's Community, North Central Community Action Program, and United Way 211 have been the historical ones that we've talked about. Also included in last year's budget, the last several budgets, was funding for the Judicare mediation project, that they do mediation for small claims matters within Marathon County. The funding for each of them is a little different. Each one is funded at a different level, but they're all within the budget. And if you have that, I can. If you have questions about it, I'm happy to answer those.
Well, the reason I'm asking is you're asking for, or you're saying we're supposed to recommend, and I don't know how to recommend it other than a big blanket, which isn't.
Well, you specifically have underneath your ordinance, the standing committee section that talks about your committee. It references two of those nonprofits that I just referenced, McDevco, and it references the Historical Society. Other standing committees have other nonprofits that are listed in their respective sections.
Supervisor Seefeld, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is Supervisor Bushman. So my thoughts when we were at the meeting last year about the budget is that our thoughts were that we shouldn't pick winners and losers with the nonprofits. So one of the recommendations that came forth from some of the members is that decreasing our investment in each nonprofit over a couple years and eventually getting down to zero was what my understanding was. And I come from the background where these organizations do great things, yes they do, but again, when we're looking at being conservative financially, specifically my background at the Catholic school that I sent my kids to, we do a lot of fundraising, reaching out to our own stakeholders, and fund the school ourselves with those that are involved in it and that are invested in that. So my opinion, as far as what I'm hearing from my constituents, from the other board members, is that we should decrease funding either by half and continue to do so until it's no more, because you have a bunch of nonprofits in our county and to pick and choose what they are. But that's just my 2 cents.
Okay. Mr. Leonard?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And that's a great segue, Supervisor Bushman. I neglected to provide a little bit of additional history there. That is exactly the conversation that the county board had a number of years ago about looking to change the relationship with the nonprofits that it had historically funded. And this is going to be a generalization, but essentially half of them were put into that bucket of what you alluded to, where we were going to ratchet down funding, and they did that over a series of 4 years. So if you look back to, for example, let's just say the 2020 budget, I know I put, or the 2021 budget, I know I put that history in there, but those were ratcheted down over a series of 4 years. The remaining nonprofits, the relationship, the direction from the county board to me in my first year as administrator was to, if we're going to continue to fund these, it's going to be a contract for service, not simply hey, this nonprofit does good things for the community. It's this nonprofit performs activities on behalf of the county that would otherwise increase the expenditure of the county in other ways. So for example, let's use United Way 211. They operate a information call center that in years past, and this was conveyed to me by those who preceded me in this position, that it decreased workload within our health department to allow us to reallocate resources. So there's a benefit to United Way 211 operating that service. We tied the allocation of funding to the delivery of a specific service that was a benefit to us. Another example, the Judicare mediation program. It's not simply that Judicare does work that is viewed by some as a benefit to the community. It's that the work that we're paying for with the $15,000 through the budget was specifically to mediate non-criminal small claims eviction matters that would free up court time that was then able to be reallocated to the handling of criminal cases that would otherwise create a backlog, which costs the county direct tax dollars through the housing individuals within our jail. So it moved cases more quickly through the criminal justice system. So each of the nonprofits that are referenced within your budget, and if you look to the last year's budget beginning on page 127, the first one is McDevco. It ties the allocation of funding, which McDevco is allocated $40,000. It was allocated $40,000 in 2023. It is specifically tied to the delivery of entrepreneurial education, the operation also of the revolving loan fund. A portion of those funds are for that. They do receive some administrative fees for operating that fund, which Kim alluded to, and the operation of that POUTS loan fund. They also get some administrative fees for that, but it's tying those funds to that specific work. When you look at the Historical Society, and you got a long presentation, so I'm not going to belabor this point, but the $54,376, that is specifically tied to the contracted services of hosting programs or lectures within the county through the library. 5 that are outside the metropolitan area, 10 that are within the metropolitan area, and then also expanding access to those online searchable records and continuing to digitize county records for storage at the Historical Society. And each of the nonprofits has essentially a contract for service. The women's community, for example, the services they provide are tied directly to the funds that we give them. If we didn't provide those funds, you can ask them whether or not they continue to deliver those services. But it is, to Supervisor Bushman's credit, that it's moving away from that kind of carte blanche, here we're going to provide this funding through the budget, to what are you going to do to move forward, the county government goals, as opposed to just the general welfare of the community.
Thank you, Administrator Leonard. Any other questions? Okay, we will move on to number 8. Next meeting date, time, announcements, and future agenda item. Committee members are asked to bring ideas for future discussion. Next meeting, Thursday, August 3rd, 2023 at 3 p.m. I will be here for that meeting, even though the fair is going on, so I can get away, come over, say my 2 cents worth and go back, but no. Okay, number 9, adjournment. Motion by Rosenberg, second by Unger. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Sorry that it took so long. The worst